Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Rosco Manufacturing Bloodline 10.5-inch upper receiver group. If you're like me and you don't care to build from complete parts your AR platform rifle, I prefer to leave that to professionals. You might be seeking out just a complete upper receiver group, and that's a pretty deep category. There's a lot of upper receiver groups out there. Pretty much any major manufacturer you can buy just an upper receiver group, and some companies just produce upper receiver groups. They don't really mess with lower receivers. Or they do occasionally. There's a lot of different categories out there, a lot of different boxes you can check. I had been somewhat familiar with Rosco Manufacturing and their barrels that were out there. They're pretty regular on social media, and I know a few people who've shot them before, and they had good things to say about them. So I was very curious to see, just for my own information, what the performance was going to be like. It was something I was interested in because I try to check out everything that I can if it interests me, and accurate rifles always interest me. So when I'd heard that the Rosco barrels were really accurate, I wanted to check one out. Now, up until recently, you could just order a Rosco barrel for whatever you happen to be building at the time. Them producing stripped or complete upper receiver groups is somewhat of a more recent thing, and it's something that I actually like. While I am capable of building an AR, I've been to a couple different armors courses, but that is not a gunsmith make. I'd much rather, like I said earlier, leave it up to professionals to do the final construction, or the assembly, if you will. I'm much more, I guess, reasonably expected to build a lower receiver group versus an upper receiver group, because the upper receiver group is generally where all your problems can develop. So I was glad that Rosco is producing complete upper receiver groups. You can get them with or without the bolt carrier group. I got a complete 10.5-inch in their Bloodline. They have different levels, if you will, of what they consider barrel quality, the Bloodline being the quote-unquote entry-level barrel, and they're very reasonably priced even if you're just buying the barrel. But like I said, I got the complete upper receiver group. For the review process, I went with the Scalaworks new 1.93 Leap mount, Vortex Razor, the 1-6, and I got an off-axis on an Ariska mount with the HoloSun 508T, and then of course your general furniture. I got a mod light, my rail scales, which are my preferred grip accessories, and forward controls. And I used a couple different lowers, but predominantly I used my Primary Weapon Systems MG lower, just so I could get some full auto fire on this upper during the review process. As far as features go, and that's always going to be the question, what's going into their upper receiver group that's going to set it apart, or at least help it stand out from the other upper receiver groups that are out there. This particular one is 5.56. It's a 4150 CMV with a 1-in-7 twist, which I prefer the 1-in-7, although 1-in-8 does a lot of good work. It handles a lot of rounds. I've always just been kind of particular to the 1-in-7 twist for the rounds that I prefer to fire. It is an electro polish, which is similar to, it's kind of a form of lapping. And of course it's melanited with your MPI HP tests. Now, if you opt to get the bolt carrier group, if you're kind of nerdy about this stuff, and I generally am, the carrier material itself is 8620. The bolt is 9310, which is a really good combination if you're familiar with how those two metals interact with each other. As far as the gas block goes, you're getting a .750, which is, you know, optimal. It's not weird, it's not extravagant, it's not eccentric. It's kind of what I would expect, and that gas block is made out of 4140. Now this particular upper receiver group is 10.5-inch, so carbine length is probably what you should expect from a 10.5-inch upper receiver. The upper receiver itself is 70-75 aluminum, where the rail is 60-61, which is a pretty normal combination. They did maintain controls that a lot of people prefer on their upper receivers, the forward assist. That's something that a lot of people still want on their rifles. Me personally, I don't care for them, but it doesn't really break my heart if it's still on the rifle. I have plenty of rifles that have the upper, forward assist. So that's not something that really gets on my nerves. If it's there, great. If it's not, great. Now, what kind of performance can we expect out of a 10.5 inch upper? Well, we should still expect accuracy. We should expect reliability. If you're not familiar, my review process is 2,000 rounds. Any firearm, almost any firearms accessory, I'm going to put 2,000 rounds of ammunition under it just to get a larger footprint or performance standard, if you will, sample size of how well it's going to perform. I mean, of course, I could do this in 500 rounds, but I don't feel like that's giving me a lot of time on the firearm. So 2,000 rounds. The 2,000 round review process for this particular rifle, the Bloodline upper receiver group, I fired 55 grain Fiochi, 55 grain Wolf Gold, and 77 grain Black Hills. Those are the ammunitions that I used throughout the review process. Now, the very first thing I do in almost any review is I want to see how well the product, in this case the Bloodline upper receiver group, handles an accelerated rate of fire. If you're familiar with this, this is known as the burn down. I'm going to put 500 rounds through the upper receiver group as fast as possible to see if that generated heat and that accelerated rate of fire creates any problems that you might not necessarily notice at a more pedestrian or more slow rate of fire. So without further ado, here is your 500 round burn down. From first to last round of that 500 round burn down, I didn't experience any issues with the Bloodline upper receiver group. It handled select fire, and it also handled traditional semi-automatic fire, and it did it very, very well. And that's kind of what I expect. Like, I consider that to be a baseline standard. While 500 rounds as quickly as possible, generally this takes me between 3 to 4 minutes, depending on if I'm going to shoot select fire or not. If I fired all select fire, I think that'd be just a little ridiculous, because this is not an actual crew-served machine gun. It's a general-purpose carbine. So it handled the heat. I didn't have any failures. I didn't have my gas block shift. I didn't have my gas block unseat. Bolt carrier group functioned as expected, and the gun continued to cycle, which is exactly what I would expect. But is that everything? Of course it's not everything. We also want to know, I mean, it's a 10.5 inch gun, but it still should be capable of accuracy. And like I said earlier, only accurate rifles to me are interesting. So even out of a 10.5 inch, I want sub MOA accuracy. And now the definition of sub MOA is less than an inch at 100 yards. I zeroed this gun at 100 on 77 grain Black Hills, and here is that 5 round group. That's sub MOA. That's very impressive. Some people still believe that the shorter guns can't be capable of accuracy like that for some reason. It's entirely possible, based on quality of manufacturing and QC, to have even a 10-inch gun or even a 7-inch gun, but in this case we're talking about a 10.5-inch gun, be capable of that sub-MOA accuracy. That's something that I really like to see, because the 10.5 or the 10-inch plus or minus closer to 11 is still a very popular barrel length, but some manufacturers, they give you the barrel length you want, but they don't give you the accuracy, because they just don't expect people with a 10.5-inch gun or 10-inch neighborhood gun to be looking for accuracy like that. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy when it comes to, oh, 10-inch guns can't be accurate. No, they absolutely can if the manufacturer wants them to be. And they put in the time, the research, the money, and the quality of steel and materials to make it accurate. So am I happy with the Bloodline accuracy? Considering this is their entry-level barrel, yeah, I'm super happy with that kind of accuracy, especially when you go online and look at the prices for these barrels. Even if you're just buying the barrel itself, you're getting a whole lot of accuracy if you use quality ammunition for not a whole lot of money. Another thing that's worth mentioning as far as the accuracy is concerned is I have barrels, Craddock Precision, Compass Lake, that cost 2 or 3 times as much. And this, of course, isn't a comparison. I just feel like it's worth mentioning. Those barrels cost 2 or 3 times as much as this Bloodline barrel would, and I get the same or better accuracy depending on the ammunition I put through them. So sometimes you're paying for the lineage, sometimes you're paying for the name, and sometimes you're just paying for quality. Because it is just an upper receiver group, there's a tolerance issue there. If you buy match receiver sets, you can get an upper receiver and a low receiver that are kind of made for each other, if you will. But if you're just buying an upper receiver group and you don't necessarily have any experience with the company that's coming from, you may not know what the tolerance is going to be like. This upper receiver group, I put it on 4 or 5 different lowers that I have that I know to be in-spec quality lowers, and the upper receiver group from Bloodline, or I should say from Rosco and the Bloodline 10.5, mated exceedingly well with all of them. In fact, the tolerances are very, very tight. I don't get any play whatsoever in the upper receiver group beyond what's to be expected, the fact that it mounts with those 2 cam pins. I think that's worth mentioning as well, because I've seen some upper receiver groups that were more or less high quality, and they were put on a more or less high quality lower, but they're from 2 different manufacturers, and they didn't meet in the middle as tight as I would like them to. So it's nice to know that I can throw this on any of the uppers that I checked, and I don't have to really shop for a specific lower receiver, especially since at this time Rosco isn't making lower receiver groups, so you're not going to be able to get those match set receivers. But trust me, if you've got a high quality in-spec lower receiver group, the Rosco upper is going to fit nice and tight. Now, throughout the 2,000 round review process, I use the Rosco in a lot of different conditions: daylight, low light. Use a Surefire War Comp. That's kind of my favorite muzzle device these days. One of my favorite muzzle devices these days, especially since I use a lot of Surefire cans on 223 5.56. Shooting it suppressed, unsuppressed, select fire, and semi-automatic. Didn't experience any issues. So 2,000 rounds of cycling. At right now time of filming, it's getting into late fall here in Georgia, and we have some pretty extreme temperature swings, and it ran great. I initially lubricated it. Some people, they like to do their reviews and they don't lubricate things, and I just think that's kind of silly, because in order for something to perform, it should at least have some degree of lubrication. And if you have a firearm that performs with no lubrication, its tolerances are probably so weak that it shoots men in a barn. That's not something I want. So that initial lubrication, I use slip, and 2,000 rounds, it functioned. It functioned exactly as I'd want it to function. It maintained the accuracy. It can handle the heat, handle the conditions I put it in. I could shoot it in CQB distances, and I could also reach out and touch steel 200-300 yards away using the Vortex 1-6. So Rosco already sells very reasonably priced barrels if you plan on building, but now you can get complete upper receiver groups that are built and ready to go. All you got to do is choose your sights, choose your optics, whatever accessories you're going to go out and zero it, and you've got a good high quality upper receiver group for not a lot of money. And like I said, you can get them complete, or you can get them as just the upper receiver with no charging handle or bolt carrier group if you already have particulars in that area. Some people don't like your standard finishes and they want to use like a TIN or something like that bolt carrier group, which I can totally appreciate. But this is something, especially even in 10-inch, if you're building a pistol, you're going to get a lot of accuracy for not a whole lot of money. My final thoughts on the Rosco Manufacturing Bloodline URG. It's awesome. It's something that I'm glad I got. I'm glad I was able to get one to do a review on, because it kind of, you know, confirmed some of my beliefs just talking to people that I trust about Rosco's accuracy. And the fact that they're producing their own barrels is appealing to me, because some people just spec out and have someone else manufacture them, which is fine. You know, there's a lot of great barrel manufacturers out there. There's nothing wrong with that. But doing everything in-house has its own quality. And that quality comes from good quality control. And I think that all the parts mate together very, very well. Barrel to upper receiver to gas block to gas tube to bolt carrier group. And it leaves you with a very accurate and reasonably priced product. So if you're looking for an upper receiver group, or you're looking to replace an upper receiver group, if you were just thinking about getting just a Rosco barrel, it might be worth taking a look at just getting the entire upper receiver group. I'm Aaron Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.